is the Happy Scientist Podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happy scientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
So welcome to episode 57, in which we'll be talking about how to come up with new ideas for the betterment of science and yourself. So Ken, where do new ideas come from, or where do ideas come from?
Well, it's a mystery, isn't it? Because you know what? Ideas just tend to show up. Now, we've talked about this a bit in the past. In fact, I will reference you to the show notes to take a look for episode 33, where we talked about how to foster imagination. And the reason for that is that's where a lot of ideas come from, your imagination. So it's worth looking into that, because imagination is part of the process. It's just part of the process. And you can get very personal about this. Like, I have to come up with ideas. You should come up with ideas. It's good if you can come up with ideas, but don't put yourself under too much pressure. It's a collaborative world out there. There's a lot of directions that ideas can come from, and they can come from places you weren't expecting. They can come from other industries. They can come from other aspects of your life. And you can get surprised about that. And we've all done this. You ever been in a situation when you're looking at something and goes, that reminds me of when Grandma used to make donuts, or that reminds me of when I helped Dad change the oil on the car, or that reminds me of something I did in 6th grade. We will see patterns in the world, and if we step back a little bit, if we take a little bit of pressure off ourselves, take a breath, ideas can come from all over the place and in many different directions. And in fact,
you sound like you're talking about something like stepping into a sort of flow scenario, where you're just allowing them to come to you rather than trying to make them happen, almost.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, there are some settings where, nose to the grindstone, and you can make things happen, and that's fine. But you don't always have to do it that way, and sometimes that way isn't working. And so you got to back up. Now, you just comment on this idea of the flow state. If you can get there, that's great. But it's not always possible. Sometimes you don't have access to that flow for whatever reason. So you got to cut yourself some slack and use what's available to you in the moment. Because it's, different situations, different circumstances will give you different opportunities. And we've all had those moments where we just felt super creative, and it's just was pouring out before. Sometimes ideas are coming so fast we could barely keep track. We were worried, in fact, that we were going to forget our good ideas because we got onto the next one. And those things happen too. It's fine, but as you get more experienced and more erudite at this, you will start to control things a little better. You'll start to see patterns of, the last time I got a good idea, the last few times, this was the circumstance. And so it puts to mind this idea of, well, how do you summon ideas? And you're not the first person in the world that's had to have ideas. So other people have done it before you, and they developed some patterns that worked. And some of this is in, there are books coming out all the time. There are podcasts and there are YouTube channels that talk about this. But I want to reference a book that we've talked about in the past, and it's an old book. It's over 100 years old. It was called Think and Grow Rich. And that grow rich part is not just about grow rich monetarily. It's about having a rich life. But in that book, it was someone who was basically a journalist who interviewed some of the most successful people in the world at the time. And this is the time of the industrial age. We're talking about Andrew Carnegie and Thomas Edison, and people of that caliber. And he had, because of what he did, he got access to these people, and he got a chance to talk to them about their processes. And he got a chance to talk to people, like Henry Ford, and Charles Schwab. So in some ways, these are storied names in history, and some of them were not necessarily nice people. However, they did get certain things done. And, you don't have to become what some of them were to use their processes. So I think about, in that book, Think and Grow Rich, that you talked about Thomas Edison and how he came up with ideas. And Thomas Edison is still renowned as an inventor. He invented the light bulb. The invention of the light bulb is like it's it is the story we use for coming up with new ideas. Literally, a light bulb over someone's head is what we think of as a new idea popping up. But he had a very specific method, and uh, I'm not going to go into it. Read the book, and it's kind of fun to read because, a book that's written that long ago. It's still written in English, and my apologies to those of you who are English isn't your first language, but it's it's a little different than today's English. It's still very understandable. This is not Shakespeare. It's not Chaucer, but it's charming in its own way, and so that helps make it entertaining. Besides, and it's a little more up to date than, say, Charles Dickens, but uh, but it's not like reading the newspaper today. It's not like watching CNN or Fox News.
Thank goodness. Definitely worth a read.
There you go. But so he had a specific method for summoning ideas. Literally, when he had a problem with no idea what to do about it, then he did a certain set of things to get ideas, and it really worked for him. And he wasn't the only one like that. There in that book and other books by the same author. There are other accounts of other people like that and their methods. The author's name is Napoleon Hill, by the way. And again, Amazon's going to have all this stuff.
I remember from that book, there's one, I can't remember who it was, but someone had the method of having a council of people that he thought in his imagination. So you would have, like, I don't know, Abraham Lincoln and Einstein, and whoever he thought would be, the people he would want to have in his council to think about that, to bounce an idea or bounce the problem around, and he would, just allow his imagination to tell him what each of these people would say. And of course, the function of that is to just make you think through different lenses, because Einstein will come at it one way, Abraham Lincoln will come at it another way, and if your mother is in there or whatever, she'll come at it another way or something like that. But that's just one method. But yeah, there's quite a few methods mentioned in that book, as far as I remember. It's been a while since I read it. But,
and it's not a long book. It's less than 200 pages. So it's worth looking at. And by the way, go on YouTube and put in Think and Grow Rich, and you're going to hear all kinds of stories from people talking about applications of this book and this method that have been used now for, decades and decades very successfully.
However, if you look on YouTube, it's mostly about people thinking that it means that you go on that and you're going to be, this is how to become a millionaire, which that is one possible outcome, but it's not it's as you said, it's not the.
It wasn't the main point of the book at all.
No, it wasn't the point of the book, but that's what everyone latches onto. So don't be put off by that if you find what you see on YouTube is 99% about that.
Yeah, and by the way, if you also want to get rich as a scientist, go ahead.
That's fine. Yeah, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah, for sure. Now that's just one set of things you can look at for summoning ideas, but part of it is your environment, and so there's some things to think about. One of the things that popped up for me was the issue of ambient noise. I think I can't get any ideas because I can't think because it's too loud around here. There's too much commotion, and there's something to that. There is a sweet spot for ambient noise, some people actually don't do well with silence. And I'll have a note to a study that was done on this about noise, and it was entitled "Is Noise Always Bad? Exploring the Effects of Ambient Noise on Creative Cognition" from Oxford University Press. And it's an interesting read, and what the conclusion that they came to was that a certain amount of background noise, not overwhelming noise, but a certain amount, causes you to have to pay attention, because now you have to make an effort. If everything is silent, you you can float off in all kinds of directions. But if there's a little bit of noise where you have to pay attention, um, that's helpful. And so, I mean, it goes both ways. There's the amount of noise that'll allow you to focus, and then there's the amount of noise that'll allow you to be creative. And they're somewhat different, but they're both useful when it comes to ideas. Sometimes focus is the answer. Sometimes creativity is the answer. Um, so you can use that. And people do this where there's some people that can't work unless there's a radio on or music playing. Some people always have a television on in the background. Now, I find that terribly distracting. And in fact, in that study, they found that if you're constantly around human conversation in the background, it's distracting. And the worst kind of human conversation is somebody else on the phone where you can only hear one side of it, because now you're theorizing about what the other person is saying instead of hearing it. But so it's something to look at. Now, if you have some control over that, that is the answer. Now, maybe if you can go and close the door in a room. If you can get away from certain sounds that you find are distracting you, well, take note of that. Look at what you can and cannot do. Uh, and I realize this might not be totally in your charge. Maybe you're in a noisy environment. That's just how it is. Um, but you may find there are certain things you can do. You can put on noise canceling headphones. You can put in earplugs. You can do certain things. You can turn up a little sound close to you. You can get a white noise generator in in your cubicle, kind of thing. Um, there, if you decide to solve this problem, you'll come up with stuff. And here I'm just riffing right now, listing things off that you can do. I didn't even plan any of that. Where did those ideas come from? You know, well, it's because I was open to them.
Yeah, okay. So, uh, being open to an idea is, it feels like that's the way to, you just kind of allow them to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what if you want to have, you know, what if you need to come up with an idea? How, when you have that kind of imperative of,
Sure.
you need to come up with an idea for a specific thing, like what
Well, I
material
think
to
that
use for a light bulb, then how
yeah.
does that work?
Well, I think these thoughts on ambient noise are one of the answers. Is like look at your physical environment and make it as conducive as possible. Sound is part of it. Other things could be temperature. Is it too cold where you are, or is it too warm? And that comes down to what you find is working for you personally. Now, I remember I went looking for this and I could not find it. I read a study way back in the day, and it might have been 30 years ago, about how if you increase the temperature of your brain by 1 degree, you become far more creative. And people were, I've tried to do this in all kinds of ways. Sometimes it's just take a hot shower and put your head into the shower, and oh boy, the ideas will flow. And try it out sometime. It's
That's what
worth
works for
checking out.
me. That's what works
Yeah,
for me.
yeah. Some people
It's
realize that
interesting.
if they go run, or some kind, they get on a treadmill, something where they don't have to think about it, but they're something you do physically, they don't have to think about, um, and that helps. And because I've noticed like something, if I can't go, I can't go walk in the woods. Um, it's too distracting for me. There's too much to see. That doesn't work for me. But I know other people that is the zone for them. Um, some people, they can, they can go on a bike ride, but for me, I have to pay attention so I don't fall down. um, but getting on a treadmill, yeah, I could do that for hours without
Seriously,
having to
treadmills,
think.
you really have to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But it could be a stationary bike, something where you're sitting
Okay.
down. I mean, you're not going to have to worry about falling off. But my point is, you got to figure out what is the environment for you. Another thing that really matters, is lighting. We are very light driven. I mean, if you think about how the eye develops, it's one of the first things that develops in an embryo, and in fact, it develops as a part of the brain, and then it separates from the brain very early on. It stays connected, obviously, but it becomes a separate entity. But we are very, very light oriented, as biological creatures. It's not just a human thing, and so it matters the quality of light that you have. And if it's too dark where you are, you're going to find your ideas are suppressed. Now, I'm not talking about being glaring light, but natural light is the best. Something that mimics natural light is the next best. Being under harsh fluorescent lights is not great. Being in shadows is not great. So again, start to control that environment to the degree you can. And I realize for some of you may look at this and go, "Man, I'm not in charge of this lab. I just work here. Uh, you know, um, I can't do a lot about that." Yeah, but you know what? You can bring a lamp in. You can do something like that. You if you maybe you can't, you're not in charge of the thermostat in the lab, but you can put on a sweater. There's things you can do about that. Noise, you like I mentioned earlier. There are certain things you can do to control the noise in your local environment. When I say local, I mean really close to you. Take charge of your own space, and start to foster that as a social idea. Talk about it. Talk to other people. Say, hey, you know what you can do? You can get these white noise machines. I got one for $10 on Amazon, and it's really great. And now I don't hear people chattering on the phone in the next cubicle over, and it makes all the difference for me. Start to present it as a positive thing, not like, oh, we have this terrible environment. No wonder nobody can come up with any good ideas around here. Don't be there. Be the person who is looking to solve that problem. And when you start talking about it, and people are going to tell you what they're doing, and they're going to go, well, I do this and I do that, or I avoid this or I avoid that. And that might set some triggers off for you of things you can do. And that's part of the whole idea process too, is look for things that trigger ideas. That's a means of accelerating the process.
Yeah, trigger it. Yeah, I guess that's the key. Is once you notice that pattern for yourself of things that trigger
Right.
ideas, then you can repeat. You can rinse and repeat.
Right.
I guess that's for me. It's rinse and repeat literally, because the shower is the one that works for me. So
There you go.
okay. So can what you want, can that accelerate the process of idea generation?
Oh my, yeah. Wants and needs really do impact it. Now you can get yourself in a negative loop of where you just want something um, to happen, and what you do to yourself is you put yourself in want. You create being in want, and you're going to naturally want to stay there. It's going to be self-propagating. But a better way to look at it is to say, well, what are my deepest desires here? Um, and I understand that you have a problem to solve, and you're like, well, I'd hardly call this my deepest desire. This is just something I have to do at work. Yeah, but for this moment, it's something that matters to you. You care about the outcome, and so apply that. Apply that um, as it greases the wheels. Let's put it that way. Instead of like, oh, I have to come up with an idea. I have got nothing. I don't know what I'm going to do. That kind of outlook is not going to feed creativity. it's not gonna allow you to see ideas, because if your attitude is I can't come up with an idea, when an idea shows up, you'll dismiss it before you even examine it. Whereas if, like, I really want to come up with a solution here, and then something comes to you, and maybe it's not the perfect solution, maybe it doesn't even get you there, but it gets you started. So allow that. Start engaging with ideas like, man, I have to solve this problem. Well, I could do this. Well, that sure wouldn't work. However, um, okay, that's a thought. Oh, well, that's I wonder. Well, how can I expand on that? How can I add to that? What does that remind me of? What could it take me to next? Because sometimes the thing that is the solution doesn't involve your first idea at all. Um, it's just your first idea led to your second idea, which led to your third idea, which led to your solution. So don't denigrate those days of small beginnings, as some prophet once said. The days of small beginnings are the first seedling ideas, and don't dismiss them. Show some respect for the ideas that come to you, and don't denigrate yourself like, oh, that was stupid. No, it wasn't stupid. It was better than no idea. So, and that takes you to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. The other thing about it is, if you have an idea and you think about it from a quality standpoint, and you think, well, that's not a very high quality idea. Well, it's not going to improve in quality until you give it some attention. Sometimes something that isn't a high quality idea will become a high quality idea if you give it attention. So allow the ideas that come in, even the ones that seem like poor ideas, give them some attention. They bothered to show up, show them some respect, and see what they might grow into. It's like that old fable about the ugly duckling. You look at that ugly duckling, and it's so gangly and stupid looking and all. Well, one day it grows into it's not actually a duckling; it's a swan. And a swan is beautiful and graceful. Well, if you just dismiss every ugly duckling that comes by, you're never going to have a swan, and you're never going to have a chance. Well, why not? So check things out. Spend some time with things. So what that calls to mind then is, well, I'm going to have to learn how to assess ideas. So how do you assess an idea? So you get that first harebrained notion. So what do you do with that? Any thoughts on that, Nick?
Talk to other people about it.
Yeah, there you go. Associate it with other things. Like, what is this similar to? What has this been used successfully for in the past? Has anybody else tried this? What happened when they tried it? What was the result? And even if the result was terrible, well, why wasn't that result? How did that happen?
Yeah.
Because sometimes the idea itself wasn't a problem, the application was a problem. Sometimes the implementation was a problem. Sometimes the results were aberrant. Sometimes it was bad luck, and it's worth another shot. So when you have an idea, you gotta first not judge it. This notion of judgment. When I talk about judging, I don't mean assessing. Obviously assessing is very useful, but judgment is when you assess things in a moralistic way and in a negative way. You're like, well, that's stupid.
Yeah, criticizing yourself.
Yeah.
It's so easy to be critical of yourself. I noticed my kids doing that. And I as in, they'll criticize their younger self when they see a picture of them doing something when they were younger. Oh my God, how can you do that? It's like, no, that little guy was having a great time. Just
That's right.
leave him alone. But it's almost like a knee jerk as a human to do that, isn't it? To criticize whatever comes in front of you and to belittle even yourself.
Right.
So maybe
and,
especially
it may
yourself.
be too that people that you love and respect criticized you in the past, and they did it with the best of intentions. But because I remember when I was 5 years old, I'm in a restaurant with my parents, and it was a sit-down restaurant. This was not McDonald's. This was some, you know, it was a steakhouse, not a high end steakhouse, but an entry level steakhouse. And I dripped something on my clothes. Now I was dressed in my Sunday best because that's why we're out. And my father commented, I was like, "Oh, look at you! You messed up your shirt." And and I remember thinking at the time, I have got to stop this. Now, he wasn't saying that to me like you're 5 years old, you should be better than that. He was just noting this is what happened. But I took it as like I have to fix this, you know. And I did after that, and I became very persnickety. But I lost some enjoyment too. I found I didn't enjoy a lot of food because I was so focused on not dripping on myself. And some food should be dripped on you.
That's half the
And
fun.
yeah. Well, and this is true of the things that you're doing in your work too. Sometimes things need to blow up. It has to happen. I'm not talking about burning down the lab, but you can you can break a few things every once in a while. A beaker could get dropped. It's not the end of the world. So I wanted to kind of veer kind of into another direction because this is a little bit of a worry that people have, especially in a world where you have to publish. And that is, how do you differentiate between being inspired by someone and plagiarizing them? So, in fact, I kind of want to throw that one to you first, Nick. See what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if it's plagiar, there's two different ways to use someone else's idea, and one is to copy it, which is obviously plagiarism, and there's another one to kind of riff off of it and to take it into another area, another into a parallel application, if you like. And it's in science, it can be you notice that you're reading someone's study from studying a different system, different organism, or a different problem or whatever, and they use an approach that you go, I could apply that here, to my my problem, and and see what happens there. And obviously, that's not plagiarism. That's just being riffing off someone else's idea. But that's just one very obvious kind of transplant of a process to another use it to look at another problem. But there's plenty of things that like Bitesize Bio itself was a new idea for this space, but it wasn't the only how-to blog that was ever made. It wasn't the first. I took an inspiration from from other blogs that I saw, Lifehacker and things like that, but I didn't copy them. So I think that inspiration's a really great source of ideas, and it's one that I use quite a lot. And I think it's quite an obvious line for me anyway, most of the time, about that. You're just using that. If you're using that idea as a springboard, or the other person's idea as a springboard to another one, then it's quite obviously not plagiarism. What would you say?
Well, I was thinking, you're in somewhat of a unique environment in science in this regard, in that it's not just you do science, but you often report on science also, and so you're writing papers and you're putting up articles. So it, of course, there's a collaborative world out there, and you're standing on the shoulders of giants. Um, but there is a mechanism for giving attribution, where you call out, this is where this started. I saw this paper by so and so, or here we're drawing on the conclusions drawn by Dr. Mehta about noise and how to use ambient noise for promoting creativity. I comment on that. I even put a link to it here, and that's just for what we're doing. I comment on Napoleon Hill and put a link to his book. Um, but you can use the opportunity to give attribution to take you lots of places, and I think sometimes people, they're reticent to give attribution because they're worried that they're going to look like, well, I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to look like, oh, I couldn't do anything myself. Like, man, don't be afraid to give people credit. Gee.
Well, obviously, also don't fool yourself that you've ever done anything yourself, because the fact that you even have the time to sit and think about an idea is because of all of the things that other people have done to make it that you have that free time.
Yeah, I wondered why you were laughing there for a minute. Oh yeah, isn't it the truth? There's nothing new under the sun, and we're all building up things that already were thought of by other people, and well, that's what we want. And in fact, you're going to find you get attribution. People are going to start referring to your work because you came up with something that was the next step. Awesome. Just be part of that chain and understand it is a never-ending thing.
I think that's a great way to think about it, is that your idea doesn't have to be something groundbreaking. It has to be it's the next step. It's the next step in the 3D growth of this idea, this central idea. And, if you think about it, songwriting, for example, it's kind of like an ever-growing blob. It's not, the sort of world library of songs, if you like, is kind of like an ever-growing blob. Each song is related to another. There's some overlap. There's nothing that you could say is absolutely on its own. You can say there's some things that were the first, that were in the center, but nothing, even those things were connected to things that happened before. I mean, there will be, obviously, you go back far enough, there's going to be something that was the originator, some guy plucking one string, some person plucking one string.
Well, sure. I mean, there was kind of a crisis about that in music when George Harrison got sued for copyright infringement for My Sweet Lord because it sounded similar to She's So Fine, and it was similar, and he lost the case, and it was bad. But then the music industry developed this system for giving attribution and songwriting credits. And sometimes you'll see a song that'll show all these credits, and you're like, how did these people ever work together? Well, they didn't. It was that somebody else had already written a song that had a certain sound in it, a certain riff in it that was similar to this, so they get credit. And it worked out. Because this is a crisis for that industry at one point. But now it's like, don't worry about it. You're going to write whatever you write, and then the people that investigate this stuff will look around and see if there's any other songs out there that should get credited. They will, and that's that. So, and the same thing is happening in science now too. Obviously, there is an arms race when it comes to coming up with a solution for a certain thing, but and often ideas are discovered about the same time. Sometimes,
weirdly,
yeah, in different parts of the world, people that aren't talking to each other. Sometimes they're actually researching in different languages, and that's not an uncommon phenomenon. That's actually been looked at pretty extensively now. So, but at any rate, one of the things I wanted to finish up with here is, the title is How to Come Up with New Ideas for the Betterment of Science and Yourself. So I'm not just talking about the betterment of yourself and your career opportunities and your opportunity to get credit, but how to make your personal life better. Yeah. If you get good at getting ideas in the lab, you're going to get good at getting ideas outside of the lab. And it's going to influence everything. And it's all, there are no compartments here. If you can come up with an idea in the lab, you can come up with an idea to help your kids. You can come up with an idea to help your community, or to help your family, or to help your own health or your own happiness. So this is a great skill to have. And so you want to foster it. You want to get good at it. You want to talk to other people about it, learn what they are doing, what's working for them, and also to help them, mentor other people and support other people in what they do. So,
I think
anything else you want to add?
Yeah, what strikes me is, looking at the overview of what you're saying there, is it's in a lot of ways it's more about getting out of your own way. Ideas come to you. You create the conditions, you sort of set the mindset, you set the direction, and the ideas just come to you. Your brain is an idea machine. And a lot of the times it's about getting out of the way and just letting them come. And, rather than getting frustrated, and writer's block is trying to force that, or, songwriter's block is trying to force that idea to come, and getting frustrated and sort of disrupting it. And so that's one way I would look at it, is look at what Ken has said there, to figure out the parameters that you can use to allow those ideas to come to you. Again, as I said, for me, it's the shower or whatever, but it's the same for everyone. It's different for everyone. Respect those ideas when they come, and discuss them with people, because then that helps to flesh them out and make them real for you, depending on what, it could be a small idea or a big idea. If it's a big idea, you need more to give yourself more confidence in it, maybe, or give it more investigation. But also allow the environment to help shape you. That's where, riffing off things that you see, parallels that you see, other songs that you hear, if you're writing songs and stuff like that. But be fair about it. When it's plagiarism. And so, or when when it's when you need to attribute someone else, you need to give someone credit, and so don't take it for yourself.
And don't be afraid to have the conversation with yourself. There's bad jokes about people who talk to themselves. Go ahead and talk to yourself. Maybe don't do it out loud. Don't call yourself Napoleon, but because that is one of the ways you can flush things out.
Yeah, great. Okay. This is a really good idea, this episode, Ken.
I love it.
So thanks to everyone for listening in. Just as you know, you can get the notes for this episode, which is number 57. In there, you talk about the main, there's the headlines of the main things that we talked about today, plus links out to the books and studies that Ken mentioned in this episode. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you all again next time.
All right. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you for listening to the Happy Scientist podcast, helping you to become a happier, healthier, and more productive scientist. To get more Happy Scientist podcast episodes and all of our downloadables, please go to bitesizebio.com/The Happy Scientist, all one word. And in particular, you might want to spend some time on episodes 1 to 9, where we talk about the foundational principles of human needs, core mindsets, and charisma factors, which we refer to in many episodes. You can also hook up with us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Happy Scientist podcast, all one word, to get latest episodes and additional material. We hope to see you there.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.